Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us and joining us for this presentation tonight. I hope everyone is excited to learn about some financial aid excitement, learn some new things. Hopefully this will be helpful for you in your college search. My name is Matt Newlin. I'm going to be leading our conversation here tonight. A couple of housekeeping things as we get started. We are recording this session, so it'll be available for you afterward. Also, we have about 45 minutes. If we run a little bit long, you're welcome to stay on or drop off as needed. I also encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. Caleb, who is helping manage the technical side of things, he will be keeping an eye on the chat and the Q&A, so feel free to raise your hand, drop a question in the chat or the Q&A, whatever you want to do, and we'll try to get to them during the presentation, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A time at the end of the presentation as well, so whatever you're most comfortable with. So this is what we're going to cover tonight. We're here talking about navigating FAFSA and financial aid packages, which I know can be really anxiety inducing for a lot of students and parents and families as well. I want to alleviate as much worry as I can during this next 45 to 50 minutes. So please ask any questions that you have that come up. This is what we're going to cover. I'm going to try to make this as straightforward and basic as possible. You might be familiar with some of these things. Other terminology, other concepts might be brand new to you, and that is absolutely okay. If you need me to back up and go over anything more completely or go in depth on something, again, please stop me at any time. I don't want this to be strictly a lecture, so please let's interact as much as we can. So this is what we're going to cover tonight. Let's go ahead and dive right in though. So first I want to tell you about myself. So again, my name is Matt Newlin. I've worked in higher education for about 15 years, but I'm a first generation college student. My family, no one in my family went to college. So when we were getting to the financial aid process, my parents were as clueless as anyone could be. I was fortunate because I received a Pell Grant all 4 years when I attended the University of Missouri here in Missouri. I was very fortunate for that. I also accepted a lot of work study, which we're going to talk about tonight. But I bring this up to let everyone know if my family could navigate our way through it and figure it out, I promise you anyone else can. We had some stumbling blocks. I included here my undergraduate debt of $27,000, not to say that's good or bad one way or another, just to give you an idea that even I'm still paying off my undergraduate loans. I've been paying on them for some time. So this financial aid journey, I'm coming to you as not only someone who's experienced it, but someone who's worked in it and has counseled a lot of students and families over the years. I've worked in higher education for about 15, 12 of those years have been in financial aid. So I think I've seen it from a couple of different angles. So I hope everything I share with you tonight is helpful and useful as you get started or as you continue on in your college search process. I want to start and sort of set the scene for you. This is what I call the financial aid timeline. It's not any one set calendar year or academic year because it sort of bleeds all together. So I want to quickly go over this because I think this is going to give us a good starting point for this evening. So as you start at the top left and move across the screen, your college search begins. This might start senior year, this might start freshman year of high school. Everyone is going to be a little bit different, but your college search begins. And then senior year is when everything gets really serious, right? October 1st is when the FAFSA is open and available. If you're even beginning the college search or if you're deep into it, you've heard the word FAFSA. We're going to talk about it tonight. I'm hoping I'll make it a lot less scary, hoping I'll make people feel less anxious about it because I understand those feelings because again, my family felt that for 4 years. I remember it well. Starting October 1st of your senior year, you submit the FAFSA to the school or schools you're considering. Keeping in mind, you can submit the FAFSA to up to 20 schools. So don't feel like you have to just pick a couple. Send it to as many schools as you want, because as we move along in this timeline, you want to keep in mind that you're going to be comparing financial aid award packages, and you want to make sure that you're laying them all out to compare as easily as possible across them, which is why submitting the FAFSA as early as possible is so critical. So you submit the FAFSA, you and your parents submit the FAFSA. It's processed by the Department of Education. And then in the late fall or early spring, your FAFSA record is sent to the institutions, to the college or university that you indicated you wanted to receive it. And then the institutions go through their machinations, they go through the processing, they create a financial aid award package, and then those are sent out to students usually in December, early January, or February as students are starting to make their decision. So that's why this is sort of a longer couple of months, because it could come at different times. You might get one package in January, you might get another one in February. Then continuing on in January, February, maybe early March, you're going to begin receiving those award packages. And then you as the student or as the parents of the family, what we want you to do is to sit down, review those award packages and compare them. This is a part of the process that a lot of people overlook or don't realize you should be doing. So reviewing the award packages means you're looking at each one individually, comparing it to the other packages, and make sure that everything is as close to apples to apples as possible. And what I mean by that is making sure that the awards are laid out the same, they're including the same figures for the cost of attendance, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit, that they're laid out the same and that you understand them. A lot of times that is difficult to do, and we're going to talk about that, why that is in a little bit. So we're going to talk about comparing the financial aid award packages later on in the presentation. But as you're reviewing those, you'll see on the top line on the far right, this is the time when students and their parents or families ask a lot of questions. You should be asking questions to the financial aid advisors of the college or university that you're looking to attend. Talk to the financial aid director if you're not getting clear enough answers or not getting good enough information. Talk to students who might be already attending that college. If you have a friend, a classmate, an older sibling or cousin, ask them questions about the financial aid offer and what everything is entailed. Asking questions is honestly the best thing you can do in the financial aid process. I certainly did not do enough of this when I was an undergrad, so I encourage my students to always do that as much as possible because it really is critical. And then when we go to the bottom line on the bottom left, after you've asked every question you can think of, then in the spring, February, early March, then you're going to recompare your financial aid award packages. Now that you have a little bit more information, a little bit more guidance, you can start to make an honest assessment of which school is the best fit for you financially as well as academically. At the end of the presentation, I'll give you some tools you can use to help compare those award letters with one another. And then typically by April 1st of the senior year of high school, you're accepting your award package. You decide, I'm going to this school, I'm accepting this award package, and that's what you submit. It is absolutely okay if by April 1st, you still don't know which school you're going to. Every school operates on a different cycle. More selective, more elite institutions really hold students to that April 1st or that April 15th deadline. But other state institutions, community colleges, regional four-year institutions, they're fine if you need a little bit more time. So don't feel like April 1st is the end all be all. If you need more time to make a decision, ask for an extension of the deadline and let them know I'm considering my offers, and that is a perfectly acceptable thing to do. After you've accepted the financial aid award package, you complete necessary paperwork for accepting your aid. If you borrow any loans, they'll give you paperwork. All of those things happen in the spring and into the summer. In the summer, you ask more questions of your financial aid office. I'm going to hit on this a lot of times tonight. You're going to ask more questions to the school, make sure everything is clarified, you've dotted every I, you've crossed every T, and everything is good to go. In August, your financial aid is applied to your tuition at your university or your college. And then October 1st of your first year, you start it all over, submit the FAFSA for your second academic year. That's sort of the financial aid timeline. So we're going to go dive into a lot of this as we go through the presentation, but I wanted to set this as sort of a baseline to let everyone know what we're operating with.
Hey, Matt,
So,
we have a question in the chat.
Great.
It says, right now I have 2 schools on my list, but my mind changes a lot. If I only list those 2 on my FAFSA, and then I apply to another school, can I go back and add that school to my FAFSA?
Absolutely. Your FAFSA is your record. So I've worked with students who plan to attend a four-year institution and then in August decide I'm not ready to leave home, I'm going to stay, I'm going to go to the community college, and then they go back, add the community college as a new institution on their FAFSA record, because you can make that adjustment during the year and then have that sent to the new school. So yes, that is absolutely fine. And again, I think it's great that you're comparing and taking this very, very seriously. Thank you very much for that question. Okay, so let's talk about the FAFSA. What is the FAFSA? We've all heard it. It's talked about all the time when you're thinking about the college search. It is the free application for federal student aid. This is the application for federal student aid that you and your parents or family will be completing with you. Okay, it's required for all federal financial aid, including the Pell Grant, work study, student loans, as well as some institutional aid. And we'll talk about why that is here in a few minutes. But it's required. The FAFSA is also necessary for a lot of state grant aid programs. So if you're State has a tuition promise program like Tennessee, or here in Missouri, we have the Missouri A+ program. All of these things require that the FAFSA is on file. So every student should be completing the FAFSA every single year. Regardless of income, you should complete the FAFSA every year as you go through, especially once you're in college, because your financial situations could change and you want to make sure that that's reflected in your FAFSA. As I mentioned earlier, the FAFSA is available starting October 1st every year. The earlier you submit it, the better. And you'll be using what they refer to as your prior year tax return. So if you're filling out the FAFSA, the current FAFSA that's available for the 21-22 academic year, you're going to be using your 2019 federal tax return. What do you need to submit the FAFSA? Pretty simple. The main thing, student Social Security number for the students and parents, federal tax return information, your 1040, W-2s, untaxed income information such as child support received, typically this is for the parents, savings and investment amounts, and about 20 to 30 minutes. Honestly, the FAFSA used to take a lot longer. I remember my stepdad sitting down for almost an hour and a half trying to figure it out, but it has become much more streamlined and easier to complete. And with the tax return information, they have what's called a data retrieval tool, where you will actually request your federal tax information directly from the IRS to be input directly into your FAFSA. So you don't actually have to worry about figuring out the numbers from one form to the other. So it makes it as easy as possible. Who can help me complete the FAFSA? A lot of people. A high school counselor who has knowledge about it, who might be a college counselor, is a great option. The admissions counselor at the college or university you're looking at, a lot of them are trained on the FAFSA, so they would be happy to help you if they come visit your high school, or if you have a meeting with them or you visit on campus. A financial aid advisor. I remember being in the financial aid office and rarely sitting down to help students fill out a FAFSA. Financial aid officers are there to help you. That's their job. So if you're considering a school and you want help submitting the FAFSA, go to the office or call someone and see if someone can help you walk through it with you, your parents, your family, whoever it might be. So I really encourage you to take advantage of them because they truly are the experts. And then finally, the Department of Education, you can get on, do a live chat with them, call the hotline, get all the information directly from the source. So essentially, there are tons of people who are ready and willing to help you in a variety of positions. Take advantage of that, ask questions, get as much information as you can.
Hey, Matt, another question in the chat. Can undocumented students apply for FAFSA?
Great question. Undocumented students can submit the FAFSA. It won't be complete because they probably won't include parent information, but you can still submit it for institutional aid and for some state programs. It varies by state, but some state programs are available for undocumented students, and often they require either the FAFSA or a state financial aid application on file. So I always think of Texas. Texas has its own financial aid application. I think it's just called the TASFA that they require. So check with your state. Again, if you're not sure, call the financial aid office at a college or university you're considering and ask them what an undocumented student needs to do in your state, because it does vary. Great questions. Please keep those coming. Okay. So as I said, the FAFSA is required for most types of financial aid, especially and most importantly, the Pell Grant. Every student who thinks they may be eligible for the Pell Grant should absolutely submit the FAFSA. It's required for federal work study, for federal and state grant programs, for student loans, parent loans, and again, even some need-based scholarships from institutions. So there's no reason to not submit the FAFSA because it's absolutely free. By submitting it, you're not agreeing to take out any loans. Your parent isn't agreeing to take out any loans. You're not agreeing to pay anything to school. It is completely free and there are no repercussions just for submitting the FAFSA. So send it out to your schools because you want to have as many options to compare amongst each other as possible when that time comes. So when you go to the FAFSA website, which is just fafsa.gov, FAFSA.gov, you're going to come to this landing page. And for most of you, it's going to be new to the FAFSA process. So what you see on the screen here. You're going to start there. It's going to walk you through setting up your FSA ID, just your logon and password, and then it's going to walk you step by step of completing the FAFSA, building the student profile, pulling in parent information if applicable, and then going step by step by step. The FAFSA allows you to stop and save at any point. So you set aside 20 to 30 minutes. If you don't get it done, save it and come back to it later. That is absolutely fine. The FSA ID that you'll set up is going to be yours for the rest of your life. So you'll use it every year when you resubmit a new FAFSA. And then the next year, you'll just go down to returning user. And you can see, to the question that someone had earlier, you can add a school, you can correct information, or view your student aid report, which is what we're going to talk about next. But the FAFSA website, very, very easy to use. Where a lot of people get stuck is in the more technical, in the weeds questions about financial circumstances, investments, and things like that. But they put up a lot of great information in each field to make sure that those questions are answered. So up here on this page, it talks about view at the bottom, view your student aid report. Well, what is that? The student aid report, or SAR, is the student's copy of the completed FAFSA. You'll receive this 3 to 5 days after you submit the FAFSA. You'll get an email, you'll be able to go in and review it. And why this is important is you want to make sure to read through and make sure there's not any errors or mistakes. The most common mistakes that I've seen, I don't know how many times because it's so easy to make, is first name and last name are reversed, date of birth is swapped around, or you put your date of birth in the parent's date of birth section, et cetera, et cetera. Just really, really simple things that can be corrected. If you run into any trouble with it, again, any financial aid office or any financial aid counselor would be happy to help you with it. But it's really, really important that you read through and make sure everything looks accurate, because again, this is the document that schools are going to use to determine your aid eligibility. The SAR will also include the EFC and whether a student is selected for verification. Now, verification sounds like something very, very scary and almost like a tax audit, and is nothing of the sort. I want to encourage everyone, if you get selected for verification, I was 2 out of my 4 years, don't get discouraged, don't stop the whole process right there. It's just verifying that the information on your FAFSA is accurate. It happens randomly to 30% of all people who submit the FAFSA. So please don't let that stop you. Talk to the financial aid office, submit the required documentation, which is usually pretty simple, and then continue on in the process. The biggest misconception in financial aid, or as it relates to financial aid, is the expected family contribution, the EFC. That's essentially the number that the FAFSA spits out to the financial aid office to tell them what types and how much aid the student is eligible for. For the student, the number doesn't mean a whole lot. It gives you an idea of what types of aid you're eligible for, but really there's nothing you need to do with it. The expected family contribution is used by the school to determine the student's financial need. The lower the number, the higher the need. So it goes from 0 up to $99,999. 0 demonstrates the most financial need, and then it goes up from there. So the higher the financial need, the more likely you are to receive Pell Grant, state grant, need-based scholarships, all of those things. Please let me assure you, it is not what you were expected to pay to the school during that upcoming academic year. Even though some financial aid packages include it as a part of the award package, and we'll talk about that, you are not expected to write a check or charge $2,300 on your credit card. That is not at all what it means. So that's why I say it's the biggest misconception, because it's usually one of the things that confuses parents and students the most as they're getting used to this. So again, it's just to calculate the eligibility for need-based aid, like the Pell Grants.
Hey, Matt, another question. Is there a good tool to estimate my financial aid package for a college based on my family's FAFSA info?
Absolutely. So the Department of Education actually now has tools where you can predict out what your financial aid package or what your financial aid eligibility will probably look like. So we'll look at some of these resources at the end of the presentation. I'll have the links available for everyone, but you can go on and do those as early as you want to, just to get a sense of it. And every college university, almost every college university, should have a financial aid estimator tool where you can actually go in and estimate what your financial aid package is going to be at the university. Again, even if you haven't submitted a FAFSA. So there are ways to predict that even before your senior year. You have those options. Absolutely. Caleb, do you have any other questions right now?
That's it.
Okay, terrific. All right, so we're going to keep moving right along. Okay, so we kind of understand the timeline. We know what the FAFSA is and what it does. So let's talk about understanding financial aid. This is the part that I know seems so overwhelming. If you haven't gone through it yourself, or if you're the first person in your family go to college, or if for parents who are on the call, if this is your first student going to college, it can seem overwhelming. And all this terminology, all these terms that you hear floating around can really feel very similar because they're all called very similar things. They can get very confusing and you can easily confuse them. So I'm going to change it up a little bit. And instead of just looking at everything the same, I'm going to sort of color code us as we go forward so we know what the really good financial aid is and what the financial aid we may be more cautious about. So the green is good. That's the money we want to go after. That's what we want to do everything to get. The pinkish color, I didn't make it red because it's not bad. This financial aid isn't bad, and for a lot of people it's necessary, but it's where I will say be more cautious. If yellow showed up well on a presentation, I would use yellow like a yellow stoplight. But let's just say pink for right now, though. That's just where we want to be careful. There's three sources of financial aid. There's institutional, and by that I mean the college or the university. They're actually the ones awarding the financial aid. There's federal and state financial aid, which is where the FAFSA is required. And then there's private financial aid. And this is the form of scholarships, maybe some private loans, or employer assistance. For any parents that are on the call, please check with your employer to see if they have any financial aid assistance for dependents. I cannot tell you how often this is an overlooked opportunity for students to save even a little bit of money. So if you're a parent and if you're employed, talk to your HR or your human resources office, your business office, see if there's any assistance for your dependent to go to college. So starting with institutional, you'll see we have some really good aid options, and then we have some potential ones we might want to avoid. Same thing with federal, state, and same thing with private. So I'm going to keep this color coding going through just so we kind of remember, because again, terminology is very, very easy to get confused. I'm going to try to make it even easier, and we're going to call it free money versus not free money. Free money on the left side is the best stuff: scholarships, grants, work study, employer assistance. Not free money are loans. When I work with students and parents on loans, I usually tell them, as long as you remember you have to repay the loans you borrow, everything else is very simple about understanding student loans, okay? Because it's very easy to conflate and confuse a loan with a grant, especially when we look at the award packages here in a little bit, because they're often listed together. So that's why I want to break these out between the free money, the really good stuff, and the not free money, the loans that you have to repay. And that's both for students and parents. So we're going to keep that terminology going as we go through. Now, scholarships can be need-based or merit-based. And I'll explain what that means here in a little bit. So this is where it gets a little confusing, right? Because we're talking about scholarships, but there are different types of scholarships that you can go after: need-based or merit-based. So this is going to be our first place to pause and do what I call a jargon alert. Higher education, especially financial aid, loves jargon. Whether it's abbreviations or initials or acronyms, there's ton of jargon for you to understand, which is why asking questions is so critical. What does need-based mean? This means that the financial aid takes into account the students or family's financial circumstances to determine eligibility. So need-based, if it's a scholarship, a loan, a grant, whatever it is, it means it's looking at the student's household to determine eligibility. That's what need means. It's financial need-based aid. And again, this can come from the college or university in the form of a scholarship. It can come from the federal government in a grant like the Pell Grant, or it could come from a private organization like a foundation in the form of a need-based scholarship. So it can be any type of financial aid. Then there's also merit-based. Merit-based is where the student's eligibility is based on their academic performance. Most often this is the GPA, class rank, ACT or SAT score. But the academic record, and typically these are scholarships awarded by the college, the academic record determines how much and what type of aid the student can receive. So it's really, really important when you're applying for financial aid that you understand what type of aid is it. Is it need-based or is it merit-based? And who is the one actually offering the money? So quick jargon alert, and we'll go back to our regularly scheduled program. So let's talk about the types of aid. So we just said there's free money, there's not free money. Let's dig a little bit deeper in this. So let's start with scholarships. That's the big one. That's the good one, right? Free money from the institution or from a private organization. Scholarships can be need-based or merit-based, as we just discussed. They may require the FAFSA or an additional application. So if you're applying for a scholarship through a university, let's use my alma mater, Mizzou. Mizzou has some scholarships that they award automatically to students when they're admitted. Then there are additional scholarships from maybe the College of Arts and Sciences or maybe from the business school that will require an additional application. This is where financial aid really is hard to navigate because you don't know all the questions to ask. So hopefully this will give you some good grounding. When you talk to the financial aid officer at any college or university, always ask them, where's the hidden financial aid? What am I missing? Are there other applications I can complete? Are there scholarships I can apply to in my sophomore or junior year? Are there other need-based scholarships I can apply for right now? So asking questions is so incredibly important. And again, scholarships can come from the institution or a private foundation. I've seen a lot of students actually have success securing what are called outside scholarships, so non-institutional scholarships, receiving outside scholarships from their parents' employer. So again, parents that are on the call with us tonight, check with your employer to see if there's any sort of scholarships from a professional organization or from the company itself that a student can apply to, because again, those are just hidden sources. The next type of good financial aid, of free money I want to talk about, are grants. Very similar to scholarships. They can be need-based or they can be merit-based. Again, often they'll require a FAFSA. Sometimes there is an additional application, but most often these are a federal grant, such as the Pell Grant, or a state grant, which may require additional steps. So again, I mentioned here in Missouri, we have the A+ program. The FAFSA is required, but the students are also required to complete a certain number of volunteer hours. They're required to submit certain information to the state, et cetera, et cetera. So even though a student may qualify, if they haven't completed all the necessary steps and paperwork, they may not receive it. So again, critical, ask questions as often as you can. One of my favorite types of financial aid, and maybe this just because I had it 3 out of my 4 years, is work study. Work study is a federal need-based grant that a student earns through a part-time job. So whereas a grant or a scholarship is just dispersed towards the student's tuition, work study money is actually earned by the student in a part-time job, and they receive a paycheck just like any other part-time job. Now that's good because the student can then use it for their living expenses, to pay towards, a new laptop, or to buy professional clothing, or to buy a textbook. But it also means it's not being applied directly towards the tuition bill, and that's where people get into a little bit of trouble. If you as a student are awarded work study and you decide to accept it, definitely talk with your financial aid advisor and find out the actual process of when you get the money, how you apply to your student account, et cetera, because it is a great opportunity. You also get a lot of times good professional experience, as well as the money in your pocket. But it's important you understand how to make sure you're applying it and using it to pay for things that you really, really need. The other options you see here of free money, tuition discounting, veterans benefits, employer assistance, and assistantships, these are much less common. They're a lot of times for people who are in certain situations, certain circumstances. So these are not the types you'll often see on a financial aid award package. So I don't want to spend too much time on them tonight. If you want more information or to talk through them, you'll have my contact information at the end of this presentation tonight, so we can absolutely visit more. But I want to focus on scholarships, grants, and work study because those are the most common ones that you're likely to encounter in an award package. I want to pause there. Caleb, did any questions come in?
2 questions about social security numbers. One is, if I don't have a social security number, can I still apply to FAFSA?
You can, but it won't be a completed FAFSA. So most likely you'll only be able to apply for state or institutional scholarships. You won't be able to submit a full FAFSA. In that circumstance, I would absolutely speak to someone at a college or university near you, even if you're not considering attending, to talk through, okay, in my state, in Illinois, what does a student without a social security number, what options do they have to apply for financial aid? Because it varies state by state.
And the other question is it necessary for parents to put their social security number on the application?
It is necessary. If the parents have a social security number, they do need to include it on there. And the reason we want to do that is we want to make students eligible for as much financial aid as possible, even if the parent doesn't intend to borrow or accept any loans on their behalf. It's still important that all the information is complete and accurate. Yes.
And another question, I've heard several college counselors say that private college can be more affordable than in-state college. Has that been your experience?
That is a great question. So Let's go ahead and tackle this. I didn't have a place to stick this into the presentation, but yes, a lot of times that is accurate. So I'm going to use, again, where I live as an example. So Washington University, where I used to work. Washington University, a private, elite, well-funded, well-resourced institution. They have a no loan financial aid guarantee for undergraduate students. So any student who meets their financial need, typically it's a family making, I think it's less than $100,000, maybe it's $75,000, they will pay full need through scholarships and grants from the institution, effectively making it much cheaper than going to a place like Mizzou that doesn't have those resources, and often students are relying on student loans. So yes, a private university, even though the quote unquote sticker price looks very, very expensive, very few students pay the sticker price at any university. So if you're looking at the tuition and fees and it says $50,000 a year, that's pretty staggering. Do not let that sticker price drive you away, because again, most private universities now have need-based financial aid for low-income families, for students who are eligible for Pell Grant, which is effectively making it cheaper than even a public institution. So always compare. And that's where, when we get to talking about comparing financial aid award packages, it becomes a little bit challenging because they're not listed out in the same way. But that's a great question.
All right.
Okay, so
more questions pouring in.
right.
Would I get more financial aid if I apply for early decision?
That's tricky. You possibly could, because you're effectively telling the institution you're very interested in applying, but it may not always be enough to make a huge difference in the decision, if that makes sense. The early decision is really, it's only there for the benefit of the schools. The early decision doesn't do a lot for students. It's a benefit for the college or university, in all transparency. So it helps you a little bit because you have a guaranteed financial aid award package, but it doesn't mean that you would get less if you weren't early decision, if that makes sense.
If one of your parents lives in a different country, are you still required to put them on the FAFSA application?
Probably not if you're living with, so on the FAFSA, you're going to include the parent who is the quote unquote custodial parent. Who do you spend more than 50% of your time with? Assumedly, if one of the parents is out of the country, you're not spending more than 50% of the time. So you would include the parent in the United States. But if you're not living with that parent either, that's a very special circumstance that you would want to check with a financial aid advisor about. So we won't get into that nitty gritty, but most often it's the parent you live with more than 50% of the time.
And then I think just some clarification around not having a social security number. There's two different questions.
Mm-hmm.
Would parents not having a social security number not allow me to fully complete the FAFSA? So would it block you? And
No,
the other question is, what should you put in for a social security number if neither the student or parent don't have one?
Yeah, so you can still submit the FAFSA to be considered for institutional aid, or again, in some states, state aid. So you can leave the social security number blank. The institution, the college or university, will contact you to clear up any of those issues. And you'll also get information on the student aid report. I'm going to keep moving us along just in the interest of time. Caleb, keep letting me know if other questions come in, and then we can circle back to any of the ones we've missed at the end of the presentation, if that works. Okay, so we're talking about the really good financial aid, the free money. Now we're going to talk about that financial aid where it's not bad, but we want to be cautious about it, right? So that's where we start talking about student loans and parent loans. Student loans, 90% of the time are coming because you submitted the FAFSA and you're awarded a federal student loan. Now there's two types of loans, need-based and non-need-based, and we're going to talk about what that means here in a minute. Requires the FAFSA to be submitted, and they're typically awarded, I apologize, on the right side of the screen, my notes didn't get updated, so ignore that second bullet point. A FAFSA is required, and it's awarded from the college, but it's coming directly from the federal government. So yeah, I apologize that those bullet points aren't updated. That was an oversight on my part. But there's two different types of student loans. So again, let's pause for a second and talk about a jargon alert. So the federal student loans available to students are either a subsidized, and these are both require the FAFSA. The difference is that the green one, the subsidized loan, is need-based. So that means that the federal government is actually paying for the interest on that loan until the student graduates and begins repayment. So if a student accepts a $2,000 loan their first year, when they graduate, that $2,000 is still $2,000 and doesn't begin accruing interest till repayment begins. So that is all really, really good news. The unsubsidized loan is not need-based. That means any student who submits a FAFSA is eligible for the unsubsidized Stafford loan. In this case, the student is responsible for the interest that accrues. So if they borrow $2,000 their freshman year, every month that loan is accruing interest. You're not required to pay on it, but when you graduate, it's no longer $2,000. It's $2,800 or however much interest has accrued over the 4 years or 2 years or however long you've been in school. So again, if we're using our color-coded chart, direct subsidized loan, best loan because there's not interest accruing. The unsubsidized loan, you would only accept if and unless you need additional financial aid to cover your tuition fees, cost of housing, and things like that. The loan piece is one of the most confusing pieces of financial aid. Before you accept any loans, you should have at least one in-depth conversation with a financial aid counselor at the school you intend to enroll in to make sure you understand how much you're borrowing and what your repayment's going to look like on the back end. That is they have tools, the financial aid advisors have tools and resources to help you figure all of that out down to the dollar most times. So it's really important you're going through and understanding how much you're borrowing in school and what it's going to look like on the back end. So we could spend an entire hour talking about student loans, but I want to keep us on track with this. So we'll keep moving on, but if you have questions about loans, please bring them up. So those are the different types of student loans, subsidized and unsubsidized, need-based versus non-need-based. And again, loans should be the last type of financial aid you accept. After you've exhausted all of the free money, scholarships, work study, grants, employer assistance, outside scholarship, everything, then you accept loans if all of that other money combined is not enough to cover your cost of attendance. The other type of loan available, and this is for the parents on the call, you might be interested to know, are what are called parent loans. These are called PLUS loans. They're from the Department of Education. They're federal loans, just like the student loans, but they're credit-based. So what that means is often what you'll see on a financial aid award package is the student loans. You'll see a subsidized Stafford, an unsubsidized Stafford, and you'll see the option for a Parent Plus loan. Now, this doesn't mean you've been approved for the loan. What it means is if you choose to borrow the loan, the Parent Plus loan, to help pay for your child's tuition, housing, room and board, all of that, then you have to be approved. There's a separate application that the parent has to complete to be approved for the Plus loan, and then they can borrow the necessary amount. Parent Plus loans have a much higher interest rate. We're not going to go into interest rates tonight because I want to keep us focused on just the basics, but it has a higher interest rate. So this is something you will probably want to avoid unless you absolutely need it in order to cover the cost of tuition. I will say though, for any parents that are on the call tonight, I always encourage the Plus loan rather than going and getting a private loan from a bank or a credit union or something like that, unless you get really, really good interest rate terms. If you have great credit and a great relationship with your bank and you want to go get a private loan, completely understand. For 85 to 90% of the parents out there, the Parent Plus loan is going to be the best option because of the repayment options and all of that. If a parent applies for the Plus loan and is denied, that's actually okay because it makes the student eligible for additional unsubsidized loans in their name. So even more reason to submit the FAFSA, still apply for the Plus loan, even if you have no interest in borrowing it, apply for it. And if you get denied, it works out better for the student. Again, we could spend all night just on student loans, but I want to keep us moving along. Okay, any questions that have come in? Caleb, I don't have a time or a clock on my computer. Can you tell me where we are in terms of time?
Yeah, it's we're 40 minutes in, so another 5 to 20 minutes left. No
Perfect.
other questions.
We're right on schedule, so I think we're doing really well. So financial aid award packages. This is really the meat. This is what a financial aid award package should include. I will tell you right now, every financial aid package you get, if you apply to 10 schools, have your FAFSA sent to 10 schools, you will have 10 award packages that look completely different. I wish it was different. I wish that wasn't the truth, but it just really is. This is why when you get to that comparison where you're laying out all of the packages and trying to compare one to the next, it's so important to ask questions because it really is hard. I always think of the analogy, if you're going to buy a new TV, you look at Amazon, you look at Best Buy, you look at Walmart, it's pretty easy to tell what the price difference is on the same product. With financial aid and college, that's not at all possible. I wish it was different, but it's going to be different. So you should be able to see your cost of attendance, including fees, any institutional aid, such as scholarships, federal aid, Pell Grant, work study. They should include your student loan options. Often they'll include the parent loan option just as an option. And then the estimated balance after aid is applied. This is what a lot of award letters are missing. This is sort of the missing piece of the puzzle. Often schools don't tell you, if you accept this much financial aid, here's what your remaining balance is going to be. And that is one of the most frustrating parts. And I understand anyone who's been in that situation. But you need to know what your remaining balance is going to be. And if you aren't able to figure that out just by looking at the award letter, guess what? Get on the phone, call your financial aid advisor, make sure that they're explaining it to you. A lot of people think that financial aid advisors are not there to help, and that's exactly what they're there for. They're there to answer your questions, guide you through, and help you be successful in college. So take advantage of them as a resource. Now, what you'll see here, this is a good financial aid award package. If you get something like this, you're in a great spot. It tells you at the top very clearly, cost of tuition, or I'm sorry, it tells you at the top very clearly, your total financial aid, fall, spring, total. It tells you, it separates grants and scholarships from loans. So there's no confusion between that free money and that less than good money. It spells out everything very clearly. In the middle, you'll see estimated cost of attendance for the full year, tuition, fees, housing, everything is included in there. And then at the bottom, it even tells you your remaining balance, your payment options, how you can pay, everything is right here. This is what a financial aid award letter should look like. Unfortunately, this is more likely what you're going to get. You're going to get something very vague with everything split out, sometimes split out by semester, often it's for the year. You're not going to really be able to tell the difference between, in the award description, between a grant and a scholarship, unless it's listed the way this one has it. It's not going to tell you any of the other estimated expenses. It's not listing out from the net price what your remaining balance will be. It's not giving you a whole lot of information. Unfortunately, this award package and then this last example here is more likely what you're going to see. It's going to be a little bit vague. It's going to be a little bit hard to decipher, which is why comparing across 3 financial aid packages like these 3 is so challenging. However, in just a minute, we'll look at some tools that will be helpful for you. What I've seen students, especially in recent years, be really successful at is setting up their own Excel document where, and parents might be more adept at this, setting up an Excel document where you can plug in all the numbers yourself and just combine them all together. There's some resources, they're called financial aid comparison tools that will help you navigate this part. But if you want to set it up on your own as your own Excel spreadsheet, that might be a really great option for you to do. Because again, it's not like buying a new TV. There are some things that don't translate across the award packages, and you want to make sure you're understanding all of those differences. So here is some of the resources I was talking about. Big Future, which is bigfuture.collegeboard.org. Great website with EFC calculators. They help you compare award packages. There's also college search engine. So all around, Big Future is just a great website. Studentaid.gov. So this is where you'll submit the FAFSA. They also have information about repaying your student loans, borrowing, comparing financial aid award packages. Everything is right there. So those top 2 are the best ones I would encourage students to look at for the financial aid comparison tool. Fastweb.com, great website with a lot of information, scholarship searches, kind of everything related to financial aid, similar to finaid.org. This is a consumer-facing website. It's just A to Z, everything about financial aid, and it's really from the consumer's point of view, so everything is broken down very, very simply and very clearly. Last but not least, I've said this a bunch of times, I'm going to say it again, the college or university financial aid office. Ask them every question you can. They're there to help. And if you're looking at different schools and different types of institutions, so maybe a state school versus a small private university, compare and contrast the answer you're getting from different financial aid officers. If one person tells you one thing and it conflicts with something someone else will do, follow up and ask more questions because, again, they're there to help you. Caleb, do we have any questions that came in? on those last couple slides?
Yeah, several more questions. Can I negotiate one college financial aid award with another college award that I receive? Also, what factors would you deploy in trying to negotiate a more attractive award from a college that you prefer?
Great question. So can you effectively leverage one financial aid package against another to get appeal for additional scholarships? Yes, you can always ask, you can always try to appeal. What's the success rate? It really depends. So if a school is really trying to make their numbers and they're really trying to get every student in, they may work with you and offer you more financial aid in the form of scholarship. Typically, it's a merit-based scholarship. So they might be able to give you a couple of extra $1,000. If you're a star student and you've got an amazing SAT or a great GPA or you were valedictorian, most schools are going to be trying to go and get you and recruit you. So absolutely use that as leverage to get a little bit extra money. But then there's also nothing wrong with just saying, I applied to State University 1, State University 2. University 1 gave me a $20,000 scholarship. University 2 gave me a $15,000 scholarship. Can you match? Can institution number 2 match that? Nothing wrong with asking that. The worst they can say is no. Some schools are much more flexible, but ask, because they're not gonna not let you start school just for asking that question. So I think it's something great to consider.
Also, if you qualify for free or reduced lunch, would you get more from the FAFSA?
Yes, but not because you're on free and reduced lunch. Because you're on free and reduced lunch, you probably meet the income requirement, and you're probably a family with financial need if you're on free and reduced lunch, which means you're going to qualify for need-based aid based on the FAFSA, if that makes sense. So it's not because you're on free and reduced lunch, it's because of the circumstance that allows you, that will make you eligible for more need-based aid, yes. And I'm actually, let me pause right there. So this is the last slide. So we're moving into questions anyway. Please keep the questions coming. I will stay on as long as we need to. I just want to include my contact information. So I know we breezed through a lot really quick. I can't believe how quick 45 minutes went. Hopefully everything was useful and interesting. If not, here's my email. Please reach out to me with any question you have. If you want to do a quick phone call or Zoom chat with you, your parents, or whoever, reach out to me. I will answer any question that I possibly can for you. Okay, sorry, Caleb, go ahead. Any other questions?
Yeah, if we apply to Questbridge National College Match, do we also need to fill out the FAFSA?
Typically, yes, you still need to fill out the FAFSA. And same thing, we didn't touch on CSS profile, and I apologize. CSS profile is another financial aid application very similar to the FAFSA, almost identical to the FAFSA, that some private institutions require. CSS profile, the biggest difference is how they estimate or how they use investment property home ownership to calculate aid eligibility, but it's essentially the same process with the same potential for error, for the same things for people to miss. So if you complete the CSS profile in addition to the FAFSA, make sure you complete everything accurately.
All right, we're all caught up on questions.
Okay. Any other questions or anything else I can cover while we're here? Caleb, I'm going to ask you, did I miss anything? Anything else you think we should touch on in the last couple minutes?
No, I thought you covered everything really well.
Okay, true. I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, well, again, you have my contact information right here. Please reach out, email me with any questions. I'm happy to chat with you. Do we have a couple come in?
One was thanking you for the presentation, and the other is asking, do you need to be a U.S. citizen to fill out the FAFSA?
Typically, yes, you need to be a U.S. citizen, but there are still, and we talked about this a little bit early on, there are still other state and institutional options you might be eligible for. So I always tell students, check with their institution or with an institution in their state, because it just really depends. Okay. All right, well, thank you all so much. I really appreciate you taking time. I hope this was helpful. Hopefully this is a good groundwork for you as you begin your process. I wish you all the best of luck. This is a really exciting time. I hope everyone is able to attend the school they want to, and everybody's able to do it in an affordable manner. Please reach out, email me with any questions, reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn. Happy to answer any questions that I can. All right. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Caleb, for running the technical side of things, and we will end there.